Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson. Hey, do you like free books? I bet you do. I bet you especially like them if there are horror books. We are giving away a new horror novel right now on our Blue Sky page, which is at scareshapedus.bsky.social. We've got a free finished copy of Caitlin Starling's new novel, The Starving Saints. Caitlin is our guest this week. Harper Voyager was kind enough to offer us a free copy to give away to our listeners. If to Harper Voyager for sending us over this giveaway opportunity. We really appreciate that. We're going to talk to Caitlin here in a few minutes about The Starving Saints, how that book came to be. And we're going to talk about Tarsim Singh's stunning visual masterpiece from the year 2000, The Cell, starring Jennifer Lopez, Vince Vaughn, and Vincent D'Onofrio. It is a great time. But before we get to that, about an hour ago, I'm recording this on Tuesday, May 13th. About an hour ago, I got out of a screening of Final Destination Bloodlines. It's an absolute damn blast, everybody. It is bloody, it is funny, it is clever, it has all the great Rube Goldberg death traps that you want from a Final Destination film, but it would also be a great first Final Destination film. If you've never seen these movies and you want to know what they're all about, it definitely works as a new viewer friendly installment. And it'll make you want to go back and watch all the old ones because, yes, there are lots of Easter eggs and callbacks. And of course, Tony Todd making one of his final film appearances in a really moving send off for that legendary horror icon who left us too soon. So, highly recommend Final Destination Bloodlines. It is in theaters Friday, May 16th. And that is enough of me rambling. Let's head over to our interview with the wonderful Caitlin Starling. Joining us this week on The Scares That Shaped Us is an author who wrote one of the best damn genre releases of 2025. You're going to want to get it. She is the best-selling and celebrated author of books like The Luminous Dead, Last to Leave the Room, and The Death of Jane Lawrence. Her latest novel, The Starving Saints, is out May 20th. Caitlin Starling, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's great to have you here. Like I just said, The Starving Saints is incredible. I read it a couple of months ago because I was asked to review it for Book Page. Was immediately hooked by the jacket copy and just really excited to see what you had in store. And it is a ride like no other. It's such a cool book. For listeners who might not know about it yet, could you give us a little taste of what The Starving Saints is?
Sure. So The Starving Saints is a fantasy horror novel. I like to call it sort of American Horror Story in Westeros, to get people interested. But it is about a castle that is under siege. It's been under siege for 6 months. They are running out of food. They are running out of supplies. No help seems to be coming. And just as things start to reach a dire point and they're considering having to eat their own dead to survive, suddenly the divine figure of the Constant Lady appears with her saints, bringing food and salvation and no way out of the castle. But why doesn't everyone come over and have a nice dinner? And things quickly start spiraling from there. And in the midst of all of this, there are three characters, three women. There is Phosine, who is a heretical, excommunicated nun who is dabbling in magic that she has no understanding of. There is Trela, who is a serving girl with a secret past, who is in the castle for revenge. Although by the time that the book starts, she is starting to weigh her desire for revenge against getting out of the castle alive, and which she would choose if it came to that. And finally, Servoin, who is a war hero. She's a knight, but she is now serving as essentially a trophy honor guard to the king and has been defanged in a lot of ways and is struggling with her role, because this is not her castle and she is not in charge of the defense of it. She just has to sit there and look pretty in a nice suit of armor.
They're all three so wonderful. I was especially taken with Focine just because I love the magic elements of this, and I love picturing her very cluttered tower where she does her work and tries to work miracles in the name of the king.
Her very
Uh,
gross tower. It's not just
her
cluttered, it is gross.
Yes, I just loved picturing just like everything has fallen over and piled up and she's
Yeah.
in there trying to make the impossible happen. It's wonderful. How do you even begin structuring a book like this? Like what came first? Was it the scenario of the castle under siege? Was it the saints? How did you start here?
I started with the scenario on this one, and in fact, it was originally conceived of as a pitch for a interactive fiction game where you would be tasked with choosing how you were going to interact with these strange saviors and what bargains you would make and what you would give up and all this stuff. So I started with this idea of a castle under siege, rescued by otherworldly creatures. And from there, I, at the time, was like, pitching different types of characters you could play. And I fell into the video game trifecta of you've got your warrior, you've got your wizard, and you've got your rogue. And those became Voin, Focine, and Trela, respectively. And when I decided, instead of making this into a game, to make it into a book, I had to figure out how all three characters, basically, at first, I usually write very small casts. I usually write one single character. I don't usually POV hop. And I was like, well, I can't pick. These three are all so fun. So let's see if I can build them into characters who can interact with each other, which meant I had to sort of figure out what they all want from each other, what they all hate about each other, what they're all tempted by from each other. And that sort of helped me structure the way the scenes revolve through who's telling the story at any given time. The way I described it to my agent, and I think eventually my editor, was that it's almost like you're doing a steady cam shot following a plate through a busy restaurant, like from kitchen to front of house. And so it's following the plate, but the plate keeps getting passed between the various characters. Sometimes that's very literal, that a scene will leave off somewhere and the very next chapter will be immediately following that from the perspective of one of the other women who was in the background of the previous scene, and we follow them out into a different spot of the castle. Sometimes it's more just momentum based, but whenever I felt like I had lost following that trail, that follow the bouncing ball, I was like, okay, something is wrong with how I've written this chapter. Let's pull back and retry it from a different angle.
So the the book does some wonderful things talking about genre hopping. Like this book, I think you just mentioned Westeros, and if people are fans of writers like George R. R. Martin and Joe Abercrombie and authors like that, you have that sort of grimdark fantasy uh, flavor creeping in the early chapters of this book. And like you said, it becomes this plate passing between these three women, and it's got all these juicy little tidbits. Like Focine is a heretical member of this order who has this religious authority over the castle that has to do with honey and bees, which I won't spoil too much what that's all about. You have Trela's revenge story. Focine has these two strange creatures that just sort of live in her tower, and we're not given a whole lot of detail about the nature of them. There's something happening under the castle, which is its own weird thing. And then the Saints show up. And when the Saints show up, I was not prepared. I was so hooked into the characters that when the like reveal happened of like, oh, we're gonna do this now, I was genuinely like, oh my god, what just I it blew me through the back wall of the room. I was just so excited to see what happened next. Do you look at your books as these kind of genre hopping things, playing with fantasy, playing with horror? Do you set out to try to subvert expectation, or do you try more to lean into character over concept and just see what they do?
More the latter. I sort of naturally I feel weird if I'm doing something that I've similar to something I've already done, to possibly a pathological extent that I like, oh, I can't do science fiction horror. I've already done that. A lot of people make a career on science fiction horror. S.A. Barnes comes to mind. All of her books are very distinct. But for me, at least on projects that are closely written closely in time to each other, I sort of feel this like opposing magnets thing of pushing me away from whatever setting I last wrote in. And I have a wide range of interests in various genres. So there's always a different flavor I can go play with, essentially. Um, but I also am like I love the genres that I'm mashing up. I'm never trying to fix something that I see wrong with the genre or do something better or what else. I'm just kind of as the scenarios emerge, I'm letting them dictate where the story needs to go. And if that runs into a wall of that genre, those walls aren't really real anyway. Genre is a marketing category more than anything. It's a way we find books we think we'll like. It's a way we easily describe books to each other. So, I try and be aware when I'm going off the beaten path, so to speak, so that I can, it's more so that I can signpost that I'm doing that, so that I am doing it intentionally while also my main focus is always on just following where my brain's taking the story.
Yeah. Well, what? Yeah, this is kind of what I was getting at. Is if a reader is coming to this who loves that kind of dark fantasy aesthetic, you deliver the goods on that. And if you're coming to it for a horror story, you deliver the goods on that. And it comes through in the end as its own thing that also is able to lovingly play with both genres and whatever other subgenres you choose to wander into. But it's nice that you mentioned not wanting to repeat yourself, because I do want to ask, you have a second novel coming out this year in October called The Graceview Patient, and I am very, very curious about it. What can you tell us about The Graceview Patient?
The Graceview Patient is it's part of it. It's coming out from a different publisher from the Starving Saints. I have two publishers. One, Harper Voyager, did the Starving Saints and Luminous Dead, which are both very much genre sci-fi fantasy horror. And then St. Martin's Press has published my other books, which have started veering more towards like a contemporary horror, more contemporary horror in a more familiar setting. But I can't drop all the speculative elements. I like doing that. So um, the Graceview Patient in particular is a contemporary horror thriller, whatever you want to call it. They're calling it more of a psychological thriller mystery, but in my mind, it's still horror. That I'm terming as hospital gothic. It is deliberately structured like a gothic novel, but it is set in a modern hospital with the added challenge to myself that I think medicine is very cool and I am fascinated by it. And I didn't want to make the doctors and nurses like mustache twirling evil scientists that are experimenting on our poor hapless heroine. They are honestly showing up at this hospital trying to do their job. The problem is the hospital has something inside of it that is a threat to everybody involved. But yeah, so that book is about this woman who signs up for an experimental treatment, is at this hospital, and as she's going through this treatment that is breaking her down and blurring the lines between reality and delusion, she starts noticing this strange mystery about this hospital. And there's this tension of is it a real mystery? Is it just a symptom of her illness and a result of her treatments? Which option is worse based on the choices that she makes? And it's a really fun book, but it is very different. It's also like one of my only first person books. It is it has speculative elements in it, but it is largely grounded in reality. Like there is a main character in the book who is an ICU nurse who is totally burned out post COVID. Like it's very much our world as opposed to the Starving Saints, which is a completely fictional fantasy universe with its own rules and its own history.
Well, St. Martin's is pitching it as Misery meets Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and
Yeah.
that was sort of all I needed to know to get excited. But now that you've said all that, I'm very. I also have to ask now, because you talked about being fascinated with modern medicine and setting this in a modern hospital. Have you watched The Pit?
Oh yeah, it is my one of my favorite shows. I'm on my second rewatch right now. It's so good.
Best new show of 2025. I adore The Pit. I have to ask who your favorite character is now.
Oh gosh, Mel King.
Yeah,
Dr. King's my fave.
Mel is the one that I think in like a survey of like my sphere of people, that's the one. And I totally get it. Like the doctor who might be on the spectrum, like I understand why we're all gravitating to her. All of the nerds are going after Mel. I really like Cassie McKay because I love Fiona Dourif in
Oh
general,
yeah.
and just the way the tough as nails way that she moves through that hospital makes me very happy. But
Yeah,
I
I
love
love
all
all
of
of them.
them. Yes.
Yeah. I wasn't sold on Santos at first. And now on a rewatch, I'm like, I still don't necessarily like her, but I'm like watching Langdon. I'm like, I've got my eye on you, buddy. Um, yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't actually gone through the series, but God, it is such a good medical drama.
Yes, it's amazing. This is now the Pit cast, by the way, everybody. We're just going to talk about the Pit for the next hour. No, seriously, everyone go watch the Pit. It is my favorite new show of 2025. It's got the Caitlin Starling seal of approval too, so
But
definitely
it's not
watch that.
scary. It is gory, but it's not scary.
It is gory. I remember when the first episode aired, and I when I watched the first episode, and like within 10 minutes, they say we have a degloving injury coming in. I was like, okay, yeah, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
they are
ready.
they are using that HBO blanket okay of showing terrible things to just be like, yeah, this is what this medical procedure would look like. There's a fun for all of you eye horror fans, there's a great lateral canthotomy in a later episode that they show all of that
Oh yeah,
I know would get people will get
it's
a subset of people.
it's amazing. But moving from that, I'm gonna try to build a segue here. We're gonna move from that medical procedure to a very different, more science fictiony medical procedure, and we're gonna talk about the story that Caitlin brought to us today. I was very excited when you picked this because I had not seen it in years, and I was eager to go back. We're gonna talk about The Cell, the psychological horror, sci-fi,
Serial
fantasy
killer thriller.
serial killer thriller, everything from 2000, directed by Tarsim Singh, written by Mark Protosevich, I think is how you say this. Yes, and starring Jennifer Lopez, Vince Vaughn, and Vincent D'Onofrio. I love just looking at this movie. I could look at it forever. I want to ask you, Caitlin, what do you remember what your first experience with The Cell was like, and why did you choose to bring it to us today?
So my narrative memories of myself as a kid are very spotty. I was telling you before we started recording, like I know that I read a ton of books as a kid, but I remember very few of them unless there's like a particular moment attached to them. Like I got stories about Anne Rice books because some very funny things happened while I was reading them at age 12, which is a choice. Um, I think that I must have encountered the cell probably either late middle school or early high school. I did not see myself as someone who enjoyed scary movies, whether that's horror or thrillers or whatever, at that point. But I'd flirted with it. And it actually took me until very recently to decide that, okay, yes, I do like horror movies. I'm just very sensitive to like sound and music cues to amp up your emotions before reveals. I am a sucker for those to the point where it can be uncomfortable and scary. So it was a very the scary movies and tense movies are very effective on me. But I would assume that I caught it on a cable cable channel that was just playing movies. And what I remember most about it was the visuals. I became very quickly obsessed with the visuals, particularly in so for those of you who haven't seen this movie, it starts off as a serial killer thriller of, we've got to find this guy in time, or we got to find this guy who's been killing girls and leaving their bleached bodies, very doll-like bleached bodies. Um, and we found him, but he's in a coma because of how the cops handled that, and some other medical stuff going on. But we know he's got another victim, and we don't know where she is. So we need to figure out, before she drowns in this Rube Goldberg water tank, we need to find out where she is so we can save her. But the only way we can do this is using this fantastic science fiction technology of going into his unconscious mind physically, like our Jennifer Lopez, Dr. Jennifer Lopez is going to port into his mind and experience the mindscape of a killer, and try and find him and do therapy with him so that the small desperate child of his side of him will tell us where this woman is being kept so we can save her life. Um, Great premise, fantastic. I would be like, man, I cannot sell that premise. That is too wild. But I'm so glad that they just went for it. And the imagery, I remember having screenshots from it on my to date myself, on my photo bucket account, that I was sharing with people that I was friends with online, to be like, doesn't this look so cool? And it's like, women who are naked and covered in like white paint and with these huge posture collars on, and they're styled like dolls, and very like lush colors and textures, and everything is both very beautiful and very gross and unsettling. Um, there's also some weird stuff involving body piercings that go on in the course of the movie. But those images, like I whatever about the real life side of the plot, but everything in the dreamscape just grabbed me and would not let me go.
Yeah, it's very much like, in rewatching it, I mean, Tarsem is known for amazing visuals in his films, but this was sort of his introduction to the wider sphere of genre fans, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of Alejandro Jodorowsky meets David Cronenberg meets Nine Inch Nails music videos. It's such a fantastic blend of, I mean, there's so much. A lot of it reminded me of The Holy Mountain, Jodorowsky's The Holy Mountain, but there's so much in it that it feels like he went into it going like, I need every shot to unfold in some kind of unconventional way. I can't just have a camera. Oh, there's a camera here and it's a two shot of these two people. Like, I need
Mm-hmm.
something different in every shot. And it makes it so fun to watch. Um, and the other like element of it is like, I had forgotten this, that the sci-fi therapy thing that they have invented was essentially funded by a billionaire whose son is in a coma, whose child is in this coma because he has some sort of rare form of schizophrenia that has essentially knocked out his conscious body. And so this entire enterprise is devoted to, let's make this kid better. So Jennifer Lopez is a child therapist. She's a child
Yeah.
psychologist who is apparently the only child psychologist they could find who was going to be proactive about being inside these mindscapes of these people. Uh, and now she has to go inside the mind of a serial killer who is, let's just say, he has very specific kinks. Um,
Yeah.
and they, a lot of, they involve water, like Caitlin said, like his thing, which I find very fascinating as someone who's watched a lot of serial killer movies. His modus operandi, and we can talk spoilers, by the way. This movie's 25 years old. we
Yeah.
we, we can talk about what happens. His MO is he will abduct you and put you in a cell, a glass walled cell in a undisclosed location, and you will stay there for a little while, and he gives you food and water and a toilet and a bed, and you just sort of sit in there, and then all of a sudden water starts pouring out of the ceiling, and eventually you drown, and then he bleaches your body and makes you into a little doll, and it is so very specific, and it makes for these amazing visuals when she finally gets into his mind. The other thing I had forgotten is they have to wear these special suits to get into the mindscape thing, because it has to completely cover like their nerve endings so that they can feel everything in the, and it looks like they just took the armor from the opening of Bram Stoker's
Yeah,
Dracula.
exactly. I was gonna say it's the Dracula armor. It's that red musculature. That just yeah, it looks so they also look like they've been flayed when they're going through this, and they're like suspended on wires so that they're not feeling the tables they're on. There's all sorts of fun little details in there that are just, in the service of aesthetics and like a head nod to logistics. Um, but they're very effective.
So I was introduced to this movie by an ex-girlfriend who loved it and was not a horror fan. Like she would consume horror from time to time, but it wasn't like she was all in on horror. She just said, "Oh, you haven't seen The Cell? It's one of my favorite movies. Let's watch this." And having watched it, I was like, "You're into this? This doesn't seem like the kind of thing you're into." But it was a great experience, and I'm really curious now because you said that you're only recently deciding that you're into scary movies, which, by the way, I watch horror movies for a living, and I am still a person who will sit in the theater and sling low down in my seat and put my fingers in my ears when I think a big jump scare music cue is coming. So you're not alone there. Um, what do you remember about like how it made you feel? Like, did it scare you when you first watched it, or was it more just like, wow, this is really interesting looking?
It was mostly just consuming. Like I was fully in the world of this dreamscape. The only scene that I remember scaring me, one was a startle and one was a disgust reaction. So there is a scene fairly early on when Jennifer Lopez is first exploring this mindscape and kind of learning the rules, and she finds a horse,
Oh yeah, the
and
horse.
then a ticking starts up, and eventually the little boy version of the serial killer pushes her out of the way just in time, and these plates of glass just shunk down from the ceiling, cut the horse into sections, and then expand so she can walk between them. And the horse is still alive, and you can see the horse breathing and everything else. Anyone who's listening to this who has seen NBC's Hannibal,
Yep.
very similar thing to what happens to Beverly Cats. I'm also a huge Hannibal fan, and I think
Oh
these are
yeah.
connected. I think I had actually already read some of the Hannibal books before watching The Cell. Clearly, The Cell takes a lot from the Thomas Harris style of over the top ridiculous serial killers that then like shaped so much serial killer fiction for the following decades. But anyway, so there's this horse scene, and that's just a very like a jump scare moment because it's also, you've seen some freaky things before that, I think, but you haven't seen like, something's wrong when she just finds a nice horse and she's being nice
Yes.
to it and it's being nice to her. But then it is a very sudden moment of just seeing this living thing just pulled apart, which takes me to the moment that stood out disgust wise, which is eventually Jennifer Lopez gets fully sucked into this world and forgets how to leave. Basically, she kind of goes native and she's under the power of this guy's psyche. So Vince Vaughn has to go in and get her, and he's just your by the books cop guy who's very weirded out by all this stuff, but whatever, he'll go in and save the day. And also Jennifer Lopez is cute, so he goes in, and while he is trying to get through to her, and side note, she's wearing this great kind of see-through black lace dress with a red posture collar, and that outfit imprinted deeply on my psyche, as I think it probably did for a lot of people who watched that movie. She is very pretty in that scene. But he gets captured by the big bad evil guy, the version of, so this the serial killer psyche. There's the little boy who's very scared. You can see kind of like the young man who's sort of the real like sort of killer version of the guy, but he's also awkward and damaged, as serial killers often are. And then you have the big evil version of the guy, the monstrous archetypal ruler of this realm who definitely has all these nipple piercing things going on, but has like his hair is in horns and all these things, and he's stalking Jennifer Lopez through this whole thing, and he's the main threat. And so she's fallen under this version of him, his power. So Vince Vaughn ends up getting captured trying to save her. And our evil guy goes into his Pope mode, where
Oh
he's
yeah.
got this hat on and whatever else. And he cuts open Vince Vaughn's stomach and hooks up his intestines to a spiked rod, and he starts turning it like it's a music box handle, giggling to himself as he pulls out Vince Vaughn's intestines. And the way the suit works is he's feeling it like it's really happening. It is indistinguishable from reality. And that's the moment that's like super, super gross to me. And but also thinking of the book that I just finished writing is definitely like that's the way my brain works. That's the kind of like hyper stylized, but also very realistic in some ways, like very specific, let's say, very hyper realistic, but very specific gore that my brain like likes to chew on, to choose probably an inappropriate verb. It's very it's not just about like the suffering that the victim's going through. There is something about the aesthetics of it all that it's not elevated. It's just it's very specific, but it is still unrealistic based on the way that it's being presented. Like it's a hyper realistic. It's weird. I have a hard time explaining it, but I know that I do it in my own writing.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot in Starving Saints in particular that um excuse me, I don't think you're like lifting directly from the cell, but having watched the cell after reading Starving Saints, I'm like, oh yeah, this explains a lot of how Caitlin's brain works in developing these moments. And I can't spoil any of the moments in the Starving Saints. Everyone, May 20th, go buy it. But I love that you brought up that moment, because that gives me an excuse to talk about how amazing Vincent D'Onofrio is in this.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's amazing in everything. Anyone who's watched any of his work knows that he is a versatile and he's a versatile actor who is capable of being absolutely terrifying. And he plays the guy's name is Carl Rudolph Starger, which is a very nice fictional serial killer name. Uh, so he has to play him in like real life killer mode, and then in dream killer mode, and then he has to play. I've heard him referred to as King Starger, the big bad ruler of his consciousness, I guess, or his unconscious mind. And when he gets to play in those, like that scene in particular, when he's unspooling Vince Vaughn's intestines out onto this little spit, I think he's reciting Lewis Carroll. Like I think he's doing some of Lewis Carroll's.
I think he might be. It's been a while.
He's reciting some kind of nonsense verse and giggling and clapping and in full on, like you said, Pope mode. There is this amazing, the costumes are just so incredible. I think my favorite shot in the movie is the king version of him, his first appearance when he's sitting on that throne, and he stands up and walks down the stairs, and he has a cape that sort of splays out like wings as he's
Yeah, at
walking
first
down.
you think there's just like some kind of cool fabric in the background, and then you realize it is attached to him.
Yes.
And there are these great detail shots of the rings pulling on the back of him, which is related to what he does to his victims. It's all, of course, interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
he
yeah,
likes
I also
to.
had screenshots of that moment for sure on my photo bucket account.
That was the moment that was in all the trailers. Like I remember I didn't see this movie even anywhere close to when it came out, but I remember the trailers, and I remember that shot of him coming down and shouting at her and her screaming was like one of the big selling points of the film. I also forgot just how brutal this movie is, and I don't mean in terms of gore, in terms of like subject matter, because like you said, the whole idea for Jennifer Lopez as a child psychologist is like there's this really interesting moment where she's talking to Vince Vaughn's character about what she's trying to do. And she's explaining, she calls it a positive side of Starger, and he's like, this guy doesn't have a positive side. He's a monster. What are you talking about? And she says, well, inside of him there is a hurt, scared little boy, and I need to be able to reach that little boy if I'm going to make any progress here. I need to treat him with compassion and care, and that's how we're going to figure this out. And it kind of does certain garden variety things about serial killers, like he comes from an abusive home, and his father was hyper religious, and um that's where he gets his water thing, which was when he was a young boy. His father baptized him in a river and almost drowned him because he had some kind of seizure, which explains why he gets in the coma in the first place. Um, and what I forgot was the way that they resolve this is she realizes that in order to save this little boy, she essentially has to kill him. And the movie climaxes with Jennifer Lopez drowning a child, which,
Dressed as the Virgin, and she is dressed as the Virgin Mary when she does it.
yes, yes, she is in this very saintly clothing, and because, well, that's the other thing that's she keeps arguing with her superiors that the only way to cure the little boy, the actual little boy that she's working with, is she calls it reverse the feed. She wants him to come into her mind instead of her
Yeah.
going into his mind, and she says that will introduce him to a comforting environment where I'm in control and I can reach him in ways that I can't if I go into his mind where he makes the rules. And so they reverse the feed on the serial killer, and he comes into her mind, and in her mind she has constructed this beautiful place where she is the Virgin Mary, and there's this beautiful forest around her, and it's all peaceful and tranquil. And then she eventually has to come to the conclusion that, oh, I have to let this guy go. I have to mercy kill this guy.
Well, and there's an element too of he wants to be done. Like the kid is not fighting, and it's not just because he trusts her. It's because literally, like the part of him that is aware of what he has done outside of the compulsion to do it isn't happy about it. Like he's very much a um tormented character of that he has been his life and brain has been taken over by these compulsions and these horrible thoughts and these horrible actions. But there's a core of him that is like, I can't do this. I've been through too much and I need to rest.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And I think that um it sort of reawakened my mind to where the what this film is capable of, because the shorthand of something like The Cell is it's just a visual masterpiece, and it is like it looks incredible. We've already talked about some of the visuals. There's amazing stuff with miniatures that they do. There's a miniature that's that's Starger's house from when he was a child that keeps popping up, and it just looks like this little creepy haunted house thing that he walks into. There is a shot in the opening of Jennifer Lopez walking across a gigantic sand dune that is one of the prettiest things I've seen in a film of this era, and it's all maximalism all the time. But there is a real emotional depth in this film. And I know that it like divided critics very sharply when it was released, and some people were like, it's all style, no substance. But I find it hard to reconcile those reviews now, because I was just like, wow.
Yeah. I think for me there's a couple spots where two things: the delivery of some of the lines falls very flat, especially outside of this hyper indulgent maximalist environment. When they're in the real world is where the film is at its weakest. um and you can argue that it's because of the casting, you can argue because of writing or whatever else. I think a lot of it though is the whiplash. If you have a movie with these lush set pieces and there's so you can move through them, and it's so then you go back to its modern day, it's contemporary stuff, and you've got Vince Vaughn just being a cop. Like it's kind of a sharp drop. And it actually it raises the bar for the suspension of disbelief. I think it just keeps taking you out of the moment. That I there's a thing. I'm gonna just make this about me for a second, but in terms of writing, I've had people comment, especially fellow authors, colleagues, being shocked when I say that like my books, I've there's been one book where I didn't have the right first scene, the first draft. Um, and it actually needed I needed to back up a step for that one. But like The Luminous Dead, my first book, it starts with our main character in the cave that she will be in for the rest of the book, except for the final chapter. And I've had people be like, well, that's a really bold choice. And it's like, well, it's bold, but it's also really simplistic. I don't have to balance the outside world and the like aim the Starving Saints comes closest. Like you said, there's this buildup of, okay, here's this world. They're dealing with a very realistic problem of being under siege and all this stuff. And then our mysterious guests arrive and all the rules go out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And that transition can be really hard, especially if, like in The Cell, you keep going back to the initial spot. You keep coming out of the dream world and dealing with reality, and everything is less saturated and less what you like. There's a world in which that is a necessary palate cleansing moment to prepare you to go back in and be awed by something new, but it can also be really disruptive.
Yes. And I think that I also think that and this is something, maybe this is just because I follow Gretchen Felker Martin on Blue Sky, and she talks about this a lot, but I think that one of the shorthand criticisms that comes up about this movie a lot is the misogynistic imagery that is perpetuated in Starger's mind, which is definitely there. And like, yes, he is a serial killer who tortures and kills women. Like, there's no getting around that. But also, like, it's a horror story. I don't
Yeah.
like if it makes you uncomfortable and you don't want to watch it, that is a completely valid decision. But the idea that a movie is misogynistic because a character in the movie is misogynistic is always a prickly thing for me, especially when we're talking about a horror movie to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I find it to be no less gratuitous or no more gratuitous than anything else in the same genre. In some
Mhm.
ways, I think it's again in the specificity of what we're shown. I think that there's for me anyway, value in it. Like this isn't just like, okay, here's a woman and she's posed so, you know, you could it I keep thinking of actually the Boston Strangler, where literally he would pose his victim so that whenever whoever found the body, the first thing they saw was these poor women's legs spread wide
Mhm.
open, like as a
Yeah.
way to humiliate them. The way that it's actually done in the movie in The Cell is very the aesthetics have a purpose, right? And they actually, oddly enough, the women get voices. They talk to Jennifer Lopez, like that. They're these fragments of them that live on in the memory of this guy. They will occasionally whisper things to Jennifer Lopez as she looks at like these tableaus of their bodies being set up. That, um, for me anyway, I was as much as I was horrified, I was intrigued. Like it didn't just feel like set dressing; it felt integral to the movie, in a way that some serial killer media does not manage to do with the victims. Like, sure, the victims in this movie, as often as the case, are kind of nameless and interchangeable, but at the same time, they have a presence that I think works really well. And yeah, I mean, it's a movie about a misogynistic serial killer. That's pretty realistic. That's a story that I think is a a valid story to be told. I don't think that it's for me anyway. It walked the line well enough. It wasn't gratuitous. It or where it was gratuitous, everything was gratuitous, and it was kind of in balance.
That is the thing about this movie is everything is it is such a, I already used the word maximalism, but it is absolutely um I also found it came out in 2000 at a time when horror movies were becoming more and more maximalist. And we've already talked about some of the like Dark Castle films of that era on this show, like stuff like House on Haunted Hill and the remake of The Haunting, and these movies that were just like big and bold and really wanted to play up the atmosphere. And it does it for a reason in The Cell, beyond just, I mean, maximalism for its own sake is great, but
Oh yeah.
the Cell has its own uh very well thought out reasoning for each of these kind of atmospheric choices. But we're coming to the end of our time, so I want to make sure to ask you. I wanted to bring this up. You have a background working in narrative design as
A
well
very
as
small background. My I will say my bio makes it a lot more. It makes it sound a lot more central than it is. But go on.
Okay, no, no, no. But I just wanted to ask. I am fascinated, and it's your bio says that you have invented body parts.
Yes, that is true.
I want to know what that means.
So there was a rewinding a bit. It was before my first book even came out. It had been sold. My publisher and I were working on it. It was due to come out. I think so. I think that book came out in 2019, and this happened in 2018. A guy called my agency saying, I'm doing an immersive sci-fi theater thing. I need a writer. Do you have anybody who would be interested and who can work fast? And my agent went, boy, do I, because she knew that I was a big fan of a show called Sleep No More, which just wrapped up its like 15-year run in New York. And I ended up taking this gig, and what it was a guy just he wanted to do something in the vein of I think it was called the Museum of Ice Cream
Yes.
in New York, and like some Meow Wolf stuff and everything. This was kind of, not at the beginning of this trend, but kind of in the middle. And he wanted to do something like that. And he wanted to do something. His original concept was the Body Parts convenience store. And I was like, oh, have you seen Rifo the Genetic Opera? And he went, no, what's that? And I'm like, okay, hang up, hold on. We need to back this up a little bit. And through kind of talking with him and working on this project, instead of going the convenience store route, we ended up going a more like high-end spa fashion, like going to the Apple store to get your new body modification angle. And it was called A Human. It had a short-lived run in New York, and it was an immersive store with a lot of really cool special effects, both sculptures and worn prosthetics. So like the various displays of products, some of them were just sculptures and some of them had live models, and like you would just see their leg and it would look like all the sculpted legs, but then like their toes would move every so often. Um, and I designed the body parts as far as I came up with the concepts in words, and then the art department picked the ones they liked and developed them from there. But then I wrote all of the marketing copy that we went on the wall next to them and everything. And it was a really fun project. Originally, we were planning on having a much more narrative focus that would kind of unfold as you moved through the space, or at least storylines that you could do. But for various reasons related to like timing and funding and all sorts of things, it ended up being more of just like a cool Instagram place with some neat backstory behind it. But yeah, it was really fun. It was a great sort of I would like to do more work like that, but it is also a very competitive field. It's a very fun place to play, and there are a lot of artists who like to play in that area.
So the thing I want to get at now, as we're coming to the end of our time, I'm fascinated by authors who do creative things other than writing prose fiction,
Mhm.
and what it gives them. So you mentioned that this was happening in the lead up to your first book coming out, and now you've had several other books come out since then. What do you feel like that experience and working on that sort of hyper specific design and concept stuff gave you that you've applied to other books?
Um, a lot of it is just it made me so writing a book is pretty solitary. And editing a book is actually still pretty solitary. You've got maybe one or two other voices in the mix. Working on that project, I had to convince people constantly of where we were going. Like what so like we would take pitches from other people who were going to be adding certain elements to it for different aspects of the production. And like one pitched, okay, well, why don't we have like the calorie counts for maintaining these things like on the little price placard or whatever. And the guy at the head of the project was like, I don't know why I don't like that. And I was like, okay, well, let's try and figure out what react like. I also don't like it. Here's why I don't like it, you know, and because it's making it very like transactional in a weird way. Or like, I think there's also like, okay, well, why don't we want to include like breast augmentations? Well, one, they already exist. That's not that interesting. Two, they make people feel insecure about themselves, about what they already have. So we were doing stuff like having like lacy webbing between your fingers, things that are not realistic, but the people who are into body mods might actually think would be pretty cool. And it's like, okay, well, why are we doing this? Why is this company doing this? And I had to keep, I was being challenged to justify it at a lot of turns. So I think that that is a really good experience to have in terms of being able to look at a decision you're making from multiple angles. Um, and also like I've always kind of been geared towards this. I used to do a lot of written role play, which I think really helped me hone my skills before I started writing original fiction. Um, Being aware of the reaction and emotion you are trying to evoke in your audience. Um, Doing the show, that's, we had to, the wildest thing that the person said to me who hired me for this job is he goes, I don't want this to be horror. And I'm like, you want to do a store where we're selling body parts and you do not want it to be horror. Well, I mean, that's a good time to hire a horror creator because like for him it's horror, not horror. And I can see some of the levers we can pull. And also I was like, some people are going to be freaked out by this no matter what. Like this is a transgressive idea. It is going to upset some people. But part of the reason we pulled back from the convenience store idea was because that was too horrific compared to a nice medical spa where you can get these beautiful pieces of artwork. That's a very different thing than here's your new liver that you can use to like accessory liver you can plug in your purse when you go partying to help take on all that alcohol, and just like little choices like that. But yeah, it really, like, it was all stuff that I already kind of knew how to do, but it made me practice it in a different context with different stakes.
So you have a book coming out May 20th. I want to ask before we let you go, Caitlin, where everyone can find you online and what you have coming up to promote The Starving Saints.
So I am most active on Blue Sky at I think it's just at CaitlinStarling.com because I've got it linked to my website
Mm-hmm.
domain, and on Instagram, author C Starling. I occasionally appear elsewhere, but very rarely, mostly just to like make sure those are still my accounts, that someone hasn't hijacked them. Um, I am doing a smattering of things to promote the book. We are doing some events, but they're kind of spread out, mostly in the Pacific Northwest. If you are located in or near Portland, Oregon, on May 20th, I'm doing an event at the Suburban Pals with Sarah Gailey. I'm doing an event on the 22nd in Seattle with the Seattle Public Library, Charlie's Queer Books, and Sadie Hartman. We'll be talking cannibalism in the red room of the library. There's going to be a New York event shortly before StokerCon. I will be at StokerCon in June. And then we're in the process of setting up some other events during the summer, mostly in the Portland area. Shout out to Ms. Slumber Media, which is our new horror books and movies and art store that opened up in Northeast Portland. We're hoping to get something set up there because they rock.
Awesome. Yeah, if you
Oh,
can make
and
it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
there's a pre-order campaign that I probably should mention. If you would like a physical copy of the book, if you have not ordered it yet, if you order from Copper Dog Books, not only will you get a lovely hard copy of the book, you will get a signed book plate. You will get a very cool piece of art by Mia Minnis that includes some decapitated heads. And there is also a enamel pin that is a pomegranate where the chambers are in the shape of lungs, and there's some bees, and it's very pretty. Highly recommend.
I'm going to go get that right now. Our guest has been Caitlin Starling. Caitlin, thank you so much for being on the show. It was
Yeah,
great talking to you.
I'm gonna have to go watch The Cell again. Talking about it, I'm just like, oh, I need to go sit down and see that.
Everyone go watch The Cell. Thank you, Caitlin. Thanks once again to Caitlin Starling for being on the show. The Starving Saints is out May 20th. Enter our giveaway on our Blue Sky page. Pre-order that book. Buy that book when it comes out. It is a blast. You will not regret it. Also, make sure you're following Caitlin on socials. Keep track of everything she's got going on. It was so much fun talking with her, and I know she has more stuff coming up to promote this book. So you want to keep track of what she's got going on because she's fantastic. And if you want to keep track of everything we have going on, the best way to do that is to follow us on Blue Sky. Once again, we are at scareshapedus.bsky.social. That is our Blue Sky page. We are giving away a copy of The Starving Saints now through Friday, May 16th. We also announce our new guests there. We also talk about random nonsense there as the mood strikes me. And of course, we post new episodes every week. So that's a great place to follow us if you like what we do. You can also head over to Facebook. We're The Scares That Shaped Us over there. We're also on YouTube if you prefer to get your podcast that way. We're The Scares That Shaped Us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, appreciate that support. And of course, if you want to email me, you can email scares that shaped us podcast at gmail.com. Always happy to hear from everybody. That does it for us this week. We will be back next week with another brand new episode. Our guest will be This Is Horror founder and author of the new horror comedy crime novel Daddy's Boy, Michael David Wilson. We're going to talk to Michael about Daddy's Boy, about doing the This Is Horror podcast with Bob Pastorella, and a very, very, very long list of guests for quite some time now and what it's meant to him. We're also going to talk about Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez's vampire western classic From Dusk Till Dawn. It's a really fun time. Hope you tune in. That will drop Wednesday, May 21st at noon Central. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.